Jeua, the watchful Danube. The Danube moves like liquid pewter in the dying light, carrying with it the whispers of 2 empires, the weight of 1,000 unspoken fears. Here, where the civilized world meets the untamed, where Roman order dissolves into barbarian mystery, the great river keeps its eternal watch. It has seen armies rise and fall, witnessed the tears of mothers and the final breaths of sons. And tonight, it bears witness to one man's sleepless vigil. The year is 170 after the birth of Christ. The frontier camps along this northern edge of the world smell of wood smoke and wet leather, of horses and unwashed wool. Canvas snaps in the evening wind. Somewhere in the distance, a soldier coughs. Then silence returns, heavy and expectant. The very air seems to hold its breath, waiting for something that may never come. In a modest tent, no grander than those of his officers, sits a man whose thoughts have grown as restless as the river itself. Marcus-Aurelius Antoninus, philosopher, emperor, father, insomniac. The title that weighs heaviest tonight is the last one, though history will barely remember it. They will speak of his meditations, his wisdom, his golden reign, but they will not speak of these long nights when sleep abandons him entirely, when the darkness becomes a mirror reflecting every choice, every loss, every burden he carries for an empire that stretches from Britain to the Euphrates. The oil lamp flickers beside his simple wooden desk, casting dancing shadows across the scrolls scattered before him. Reports from the front, casualty lists, supply requests, each document a reminder that while Rome sleeps safely in her marble halls, young men die in the mud of Germania. He has read them all twice, 3 times. The words blur together now, but sleep still will not come. Outside, the Danube murmurs its ancient song. It has flowed here since before Rome was even a dream in Romulus's mind. It will flow here long after the last eagle standard has fallen to rust. There is something both comforting and terrifying in this knowledge, the way it makes all human struggle seem both precious and impossibly small. Marcus sets down his stylus and rubs his temples. The headaches have been worse lately. The physicians blame the damp air, the stress of campaign life. But he knows better. This pain comes from deeper places, from the constant tension between who he must be and who he is. Emperor and man, stoic sage and worried father, the divine Augustus, and a 50-year-old whose joints ache when the weather turns. He thinks of Rome tonight, of Faustina, his beloved wife, probably asleep now in their private chambers. Does she dream of him? Or has she learned, as so many wives of powerful men do, to find peace in his absence? The thought stings more than he cares to admit. When did the space between them grow so wide? When did duty become a wall instead of a bridge? The tent flap stirs in the breeze, and for a moment he can smell the river more clearly. That green, living scent of water and reeds, of fish and flowing time. It reminds him of his childhood, of summer afternoons by the Tiber when the weight of empire was still just a distant possibility. When Marcus Annius Verus was simply a boy who loved books and asked too many questions. Before adoption elevated him, before philosophy called to him, before the purple claimed him entirely. A night bird calls somewhere in the darkness beyond the camp's perimeter. Its voice is clear and wild, untouched by human ambition. Marcus envies it, envies its simplicity, its freedom from the burden of choice. The bird does not lie awake wondering if its decisions will echo through generations. It simply exists, moment by moment, call by call. But such thoughts are luxury he cannot afford for long. Even here, in this quiet hour, the empire demands his attention. Somewhere beyond the river, Marcomannic warriors sharpen their weapons and plan their next assault. They fight for their homeland, their families, their way of life. How can he fault them for that? Yet he must oppose them, must send Roman sons to die for Roman mothers, because this is what it means to be Caesar. The weight of it all settles on his shoulders like a cloak made of lead. Every choice branches into 1,000 consequences. Every mercy might be seen as weakness. Every firmness might spark unnecessary cruelty. The philosophers speak of virtue as if it were a clear path, well lit and straight. But here, in the practical darkness of rule, virtue becomes a labyrinth where every turn reveals new shadows. He reaches for his private journal, the one that will someday be called his Meditations, though he thinks of it simply as a place to set down the day's burdens. The leather is worn smooth by his hands, the pages filled with thoughts he dares not speak aloud. Here, at least, he can be honest. Here he can admit his doubts, his fears, his desperate longing for wisdom he feels he lacks. Remember, he writes slowly, that very little disturbs the man who lives according to nature. But even as he forms the words, he wonders if he believes them tonight. The Stoic teachings that once seemed so clear, so solid, feel fragile in the face of endless war, of young men who will never see another dawn, of an empire that grows more unwieldy with each passing year. The river continues its patient flow, indifferent to human philosophy. It carries fallen leaves and broken branches, the detritus of countless storms. Yet it never stops moving, never stops seeking its destination. There is a lesson in this. Something about persistence, about accepting what cannot be changed while still moving forward. But tonight, the lesson feels distant, academic. Tonight, he is simply tired. A gentle knock at the tent post interrupts his thoughts. Caesar? The voice belongs to Lucius, his aide, a young man whose earnestness reminds Marcus painfully of his own son, Commodus. The watch reports all quiet along the river. Will there be anything else tonight? No, Marcus replies softly. Thank you. Get some rest. And you, Caesar? Perhaps you should... I will, soon. But they both know it is a kind lie. Sleep has become a stranger to him, a guest who no longer feels welcome in his presence. Instead, he will sit here until dawn, wrestling with thoughts that have no easy answers, carrying burdens that cannot be shared, being everything to everyone except, perhaps, himself. As Lucius's footsteps fade into the night sounds of the camp, Marcus returns to his journal. But the words will not come now. Instead, he finds himself listening to the Danube, to its endless, patient song. Somewhere in that sound is a kind of peace, a reminder that some things endure beyond the reach of human worry. The lamp burns lower, casting longer shadows. The reports still wait on his desk, but they can wait until morning. Tonight belongs to this quiet struggle, this dance between duty and humanity, between the man who must decide and the heart that must somehow bear the weight of those decisions. And the river flows on, carrying its secrets toward distant seas, while on its banks an emperor sits wakeful and alone, holding vigil over an empire that sleeps, trusting in his wisdom, his strength, his sleepless care. Tomorrow will bring new challenges, new impossible choices, but for now there is only this moment, this tent, this flickering light, and the eternal murmur of water over stone, reminding him that some things are larger than empires, older than ambition, and more patient than any human heart. The Danube keeps its watch, and so does he. The Emperor's tent. He pulls the heavy wool cloak tighter around his shoulders and turns from the tent's opening. The canvas walls seem to breathe with the night wind, expanding and contracting like the chest of some great sleeping beast. How many nights has he spent like this? How many more will come? The writing desk waits in the corner, a simple wooden table that has followed him across half the empire, Upon it lies the leather-bound journal where he records his thoughts, his struggles, his attempts to make sense of a world that often defies understanding. The meditations, though he would never call them by such a grand name, to him they are simply conversations with himself. He settles onto the camp stool and dips his reed pen in ink. The familiar weight of it brings a small comfort. This ritual of putting thoughts to parchment when sleep will not come. Remember, he writes slowly, that very little disturbs you. It is your judgment of events, not the events themselves, that brings suffering. The words flow from years of training, from countless hours spent with his beloved tutor Fronto, who first introduced him to the Stoic teachings. He can almost hear the old man's voice now, patient and measured, cutting through the noise of imperial duties to reach something deeper, something true. Marcus, Fronto would say during those long afternoons in Rome, when the weight of succession already pressed upon young shoulders. The emperor you will become matters far less than the man you choose to be each day. They would walk the gardens then, master and student, exploring ideas that seemed so clear in the marble halls of the capital. But here in this tent with death camping just beyond the river, those teachings feel both more precious and more fragile. How easy it was to speak of virtue when surrounded by beauty and abundance. How much harder to practice acceptance when faced with reports of villages burned, families scattered, young soldiers who will never see Rome again. He sets down the pen and rubs his temples. The headaches have been coming more frequently, a dull throb that mirrors the persistent ache in his chest. The physicians speak of humors and recommend bloodletting, but Marcus knows the true source of his pain. It is the weight of 10,000 decisions, each one carrying consequences he can barely fathom. Outside, he hears the soft scrape of footsteps on frost-hardened ground, a gentle knock at the tent post, respectful but insistent. "Enter," he calls softly. The tent flap parts to reveal a figure he has come to cherish in these dark months. The camp cook, a woman whose name he has never learned, but whose presence has become a source of unexpected comfort. She is perhaps 50, her hair silver-streaked beneath a simple cloth covering, her hands bearing the honest calluses of a lifetime spent in service. "Forgive the intrusion, Caesar," she says, her voice carrying the warm accent of the Italian countryside. "But I noticed your lamp still burning. I thought, perhaps some broth?" She carries a wooden bowl that steams in the cold air, filling the tent with the rich scent of herbs and bone marrow. It is simple fare, the kind of meal his Stoic teachers would approve, nourishing without excess, humble without pretension. "You are kind," Marcus says, accepting the bowl with genuine gratitude. "But tell me, do you not need your rest? The work begins early." She smiles, an expression that transforms her weathered face into something almost maternal. "Rest comes when it will, Caesar, but warmth we can provide when needed." She pauses, studying his face with the frank assessment of someone who has fed countless worried souls. The burden sits heavy tonight. It is not a question, and somehow her directness cuts through all the careful protocols that usually surround him. For a moment, he is not the emperor, not the commander, not the philosopher trying to live up to impossible ideals. He is simply a man, tired and uncertain, grateful for hot soup and human kindness. "It does," he admits quietly. "There are choices ahead, decisions that will affect thousands. And I find myself wondering, how does one choose between competing goods? How does one weigh the life of a soldier against the security of a province? The suffering of today against the peace of tomorrow?" The cook settles onto a small stool near the brazier, uninvited but somehow welcome. "In my village," she says, stirring the coals with an iron rod. "We had a saying. The river does not ask the stones permission to flow. Some things simply are Caesar. We do what we can, with what we have, in the time given to us." Her words echo something Fronto once taught him, but hearing it from this woman, this person who has likely never read a single philosophical text, but who understands life in ways the scholars sometimes miss, the truth feels both simpler and more profound. Marcus sips the broth, letting its warmth spread through his chest. "And yet," he says, "the river shapes the stone, just as the stone shapes the river. We are not passive observers of fate. We are participants in its unfolding." "True enough," she agrees. But the river does not lie awake worrying about the stone's comfort. She pokes at the fire again, sending sparks dancing toward the tent's peak. It simply flows, as it must, as it was made to do. They sit in comfortable silence for a while, emperor and cook, sharing the warmth of fire and simple food. Outside, the night sounds continue, the river's eternal murmur, the soft challenge and response of sentries, the occasional snort of a horse settling into sleep. "I should let you rest," the woman finally says, rising from her stool, but she pauses at the tent opening, looking back with something that might be affection. "The soup will help you sleep, but so will remembering that even emperors are only human. The gods do not expect perfection, Caesar, only effort, only care, only the willingness to try again tomorrow." When she is gone, Marcus returns to his writing, but the words that come now are different, less rigid, more honest. "I am one man," he writes, "with one mind, one heart, one finite capacity for wisdom. I cannot solve every problem, cannot prevent every suffering, cannot be all things to all people, but I can be present to this moment, this choice, this opportunity to act with whatever grace I can summon." The pen moves more easily now, as if the cook's simple wisdom has loosened something that was held too tight. He writes of the river, of stones and flowing water, of the strange comfort found in accepting one's limitations while still striving to transcend them. The broth has indeed made him drowsy, or perhaps it is simply the relief of honest conversation, the rare gift of being seen as human rather than imperial. His eyelids grow heavy, and for the first time in days, sleep seems possible. But before surrendering to rest, he adds one final line to the journal, words that seem to come from somewhere deeper than conscious thought. "The tent is small, the empire vast, but kindness fits in any space, and wisdom often wears the simplest clothes." Simple comforts. He sets down his stylus and closes the leather journal, the weight of the day's words settling into the parchment like sediment in still water. The tent feels smaller now, more intimate, as if the act of writing has somehow drawn its walls closer around him. Outside, the sounds of the camp continue their nightly rhythm, the low murmur of soldiers sharing stories around dying fires, the soft whinny of horses settling for sleep, the steady tread of sentries walking their eternal circles. Marcus reaches for the wooden bowl the cook left beside his writing table, still warm to the touch, steam rising in gentle spirals that catch the lamplight. The broth is simple, barley and herbs, perhaps some dried meat, nothing that would grace the tables of Rome's elite. Yet as he lifts it to his lips, he tastes something more precious than the exotic spices that once flowed through his palace kitchens. He tastes care, intention, the quiet dignity of someone who tends to others without expectation of recognition or reward. How many meals has he eaten? He wonders. Where the hands that prepared them remained invisible to him. How many acts of service passed unnoticed while his attention was fixed on matters of state, on the grand sweep of history, on the weight of decisions that would echo through generations. The cook who brought him this broth tonight, does she have children waiting somewhere for her return? Does she dream of a small garden, a quiet hearth, a life measured not in conquered territories, but in the simple abundance of enough? He thinks of his own mother, Domitia Lucilla, who despite her wealth and status would sometimes dismiss the servants and prepare his childhood meals with her own hands. Even emperors must remember they are fed by human kindness, she would say, her fingers gentle as she broke bread for him. Power may command obedience, but it cannot create the love that seasons a meal shared freely. The memory brings unexpected tears to his eyes, not of grief, but of gratitude for wisdom that took decades to fully understand. Tonight, in this frontier tent thousands of miles from the marble halls of power, he finally grasps what she meant. The cook's simple gesture has nourished something in him that no imperial feast ever could. The recognition of his own fundamental humanity, his need for care that has nothing to do with his title or his authority. From somewhere across the camp comes the sound of quiet laughter, soldiers sharing some jest or story, their voices carrying the easy camaraderie of men who have faced danger together. Marcus finds himself smiling as he listens, remembering his own youth, the friendships forged in philosophy schools and training grounds, before the weight of the purple separated him from such simple companionship. When did he last laugh without calculation, without wondering how his mirth might be interpreted, whether it showed weakness or strength to those who watched his every expression for signs of imperial favor or displeasure? The broth warms him from within as he considers this, how isolation becomes its own kind of armor, protecting and imprisoning in equal measure. Perhaps this is why sleep has eluded him these past weeks. Not just the burden of impossible decisions, but the weight of carrying them alone, of being the final voice in a chorus of competing counsel, the single point where all the empire's complexities converge and demand resolution. But tonight, for these precious moments, he is simply a man drinking warm broth in a small tent, listening to the night sounds of other human beings finding their way toward rest. The scroll beside him catches the lamplight, its surface marked with his own careful script, the words that poured from him like water from a spring he didn't know existed. When did he last write for himself alone, without considering how his thoughts might be received by senators or historians, without weighing each phrase for its political implications? The act of writing, he realizes, has been its own form of prayer tonight, a conversation with the part of himself that exists beyond titles and responsibilities, the Marcus, who still marvels at the complexity of a single human heart, who finds profound mystery in the way morning light falls across a tent wall, who can be moved to tears by an old woman's kindness. This Marcus has been waiting patiently beneath the emperor's robes, ready to emerge whenever given permission to simply be. He thinks of Epictetus, his teacher's teacher, who understood something about simplicity that all of Marcus's education in rhetoric and statecraft could not provide. Wealth consists in not having great possessions, the old philosopher taught, but in having few wants. Tonight, Marcus wants for nothing more than this warm broth, honest words, the sound of rain beginning to patter gently against the tent walls, the promise of sleep that comes not from exhaustion, but from a kind of peace he had almost forgotten was possible. The rain grows steadier now, not the fierce downpour that turns battlefields to mud and misery, but the gentle, persistent rain that speaks of renewal, of the earth receiving what it needs to continue its ancient work of growth and sustenance. Marcus sets down the empty bowl and listens, imagining how this same rain falls on the gardens of Rome, on the small farms that feed his empire, on the graves of soldiers who will never again feel its blessing on their faces. There is democracy in rain, he thinks, the way it falls on emperor and slave alike, on friend and enemy, on the just and unjust without distinction. Perhaps this is what the Stoics meant when they spoke of living according to nature, not the domination of the natural world, but the recognition that he too is subject to its rhythms, its cycles of rest and renewal, its insistence that even the most powerful must eventually lay down their burdens and trust in something larger than themselves. The lamp flame flickers as a draft finds its way through the tent walls, casting dancing shadows that transform his simple furnishings into something almost magical. The wooden table becomes an altar, the leather journal a sacred text, the empty bowl a chalice that held not wine, but the communion of human care, freely given and gratefully received. How strange, he muses, that it has taken a lifetime of seeking wisdom in books and debates to arrive at truths that a camp cook carries in her weathered hands, that a simple meal can teach what years of philosophy only pointed toward. His eyelids grow heavy now, not with the leaden weight of exhaustion, but with the sweet drowsiness that comes after hunger has been satisfied, after loneliness has been touched by kindness, after the restless mind has finally found a place to rest. The rain continues its gentle percussion against the tent, a lullaby older than empires, older than the very concept of power that has shaped his days and haunted his nights. Tomorrow will bring new challenges, new impossible choices, new weights for his shoulders to bear. But tonight he can sleep knowing that he has remembered something essential, that beneath all the complexity of rule and responsibility, life offers its greatest gifts freely, and wisdom often comes disguised as the simplest human gestures, warm broth shared without ceremony, honest words spoken without agenda, rain falling equally on all who shelter beneath the vast democracy of sky. The guard's vigil. Just beyond the heavy canvas of the imperial tent, a guard stands his watch in the gentle rain. His name is Gaius, a veteran of 12 campaigns, a man whose weathered hands have gripped sword and spear through seasons of war that blur together like water flowing downstream. Tonight he listens to the soft scratch of stylus against wax tablet from within, the sound of his emperor writing by lamplight, and something in that quiet persistence moves him more than any victory speech ever could. Gaius has seen Marcus-Aurelius in council, watched him weigh the lives of thousands with the gravity of a man who truly understands the weight of each soul. He has witnessed the emperor's face in the moments after difficult decisions, seen how victory and defeat both leave their marks, how responsibility carves lines deeper than any enemy blade. Tonight, as rain patters against his helmet and runs in rivulets down his cloak, Gaius finds himself thinking about the peculiar burden of those who must choose for others. The camp sleeps around them, save for the scattered sentries who keep their own quiet vigils. Somewhere a horse nickels softly, settling into rest. The Danube whispers its eternal conversation with the shore, and in the tent behind him, the most powerful man in the known world continues his nightly ritual of examining his own soul, word by careful word, thought by honest thought. Gaius remembers his first sight of Marcus Aurelius, not in the purple of ceremony, but in the mud of a battlefield, kneeling beside a wounded soldier, speaking words of comfort to a boy who would not see another dawn. The emperor's cloak had been torn, his face streaked with dirt, and yet there had been something in his presence that spoke of strength deeper than physical power, a kind of enduring grace that comes only from accepting what cannot be changed while still fighting for what must be protected. The rain grows gentler now, shifting from steady drops to the finest mist, the kind that seems to hang in the air like a blessing. Gaius adjusts his grip on his spear and thinks of his own small choices. The decision to share his rations with a younger soldier, the choice to speak encouragement instead of complaint, the daily selection of kindness over indifference. Perhaps, he muses. The difference between emperor and guard is not so vast as it appears. Perhaps they are all simply human beings trying to choose well in an uncertain world. Inside the tent, Marcus sets down his stylus and flexes fingers grown stiff from writing. The words flow more easily now, as if the rain has washed away some invisible barrier between thought and expression. He writes of duty, not as a burden imposed from without, but as a choice made freely by one who recognizes his place in the great web of human connection. What is not good for the swarm cannot be good for the bee, he inscribes, the familiar maxim taking on new depth in the quiet of this frontier night. The lamp flame wavers slightly in a breath of air that finds its way through the tent flaps, casting dancing shadows across the wax tablet. Marcus watches the light play across his words, thinking of all the lives that flicker just as uncertainly in the darkness beyond these canvas walls. Soldiers dreaming of home, barbarian warriors camped across the river, dreaming perhaps of the same peace. Mothers in distant Rome wondering if their sons will return, wives keeping their own vigils by cold hearths. He thinks of the cook's words about acceptance, how they echo the teachings of Epictetus, that ancient wisdom which reminds him that suffering comes not from circumstances themselves, but from our resistance to what cannot be changed. The war will continue. Men will die. Impossible decisions will demand to be made, and through it all the great wheel of existence will turn as it has always turned, indifferent to human preference, yet somehow, mysteriously, still responsive to human choice. Marcus dips his stylus again and writes slowly, deliberately. Accept the things to which fate binds you, and love the people with whom fate associates you. The words seem to glow in the lamplight, not with any supernatural radiance, but with the quiet illumination that comes from truth recognized and embraced. He thinks of Gaius standing guard in the rain, of the cook who brought unexpected wisdom with simple broth, of all the unnamed souls who make possible the life of empire through their daily acts of faithfulness. Outside. The guard shifts his weight and pulls his cloak closer against the mist. Gaius finds himself grateful for this quiet duty, this chance to stand between his emperor and the uncertainties of night. There is something deeply satisfying about this simple act of protection, this offering of his wakefulness so that another might find rest. He thinks of his own children, asleep now in a distant village, and wonders if they too are watched over by someone who understands that love sometimes expresses itself through vigilance, through the willingness to bear discomfort so that others might know peace. The rain stops entirely now, leaving only the sound of water dripping from tent ropes and the gentle murmur of the river. In the sudden quiet, both emperor and guard feel the settling that comes when the world exhales, when the day's tensions begin their slow dissolution into the deeper rhythms of rest and restoration. Marcus writes his final words of the evening, a simple prayer of gratitude for the gift of consciousness, for the ability to choose response over reaction, for the privilege of serving something larger than personal comfort. He thinks of tomorrow's councils, the maps that will be studied, the strategies that will be debated, and finds that he can face these coming challenges with something approaching equanimity. Not because they will be easy, but because he has remembered tonight what it means to be human in the fullest sense. The lamp burns lower, casting a warm glow that seems to embrace both the written words and the man who shaped them. Outside, Gaius continues his patient watch, a guardian not just of the emperor's safety, but of the quiet space in which wisdom can emerge from the day's chaos. in which a soul can examine itself without fear, in which rest becomes possible even in the midst of war. And in this shared vigil, emperor and guard participate in something ancient and sacred, the human commitment to watching over one another, to creating islands of peace in an ocean of uncertainty, to believing that consciousness itself, examined honestly and lived with courage, is perhaps the most profound form of worship the world has ever known. Night's reflections. The lamplight flickers against the tent walls, casting shadows that dance like memories across the weathered canvas. And Marcus sets down his stylus for a moment, watching these ephemeral shapes that exist only in the marriage of flame and fabric. Here, one instant, gone the next, like the very thoughts he has been trying to capture in his writings. How strange it is, he muses, that we spend our days grasping after permanence, building monuments that will outlast our bodies, seeking legacy in stone and bronze, when the most profound truths reveal themselves in these fleeting moments, in the play of light against darkness, in the sound of rain on canvas, in the quiet breathing of 10,000 sleeping soldiers who trust him to guard their dreams. Outside. Gaius shifts slightly on his feet, feeling the weight of the night settling deeper into his bones. He has stood watch through countless such evenings, has learned to read the subtle signs of his emperor's restlessness, the particular quality of silence that emanates from the tent when Marcus wrestles with decisions that will echo across generations. Tonight feels different somehow, quieter, as if the very air has grown thicker with contemplation. Marcus picks up his stylus again, but instead of writing, he finds himself remembering his old teacher, Fronto, that master of rhetoric who had tried so earnestly to shape him into an orator. Words are tools of power, Marcus, Fronto had insisted, his voice carrying the authority of one who had swayed senates and moved crowds. Learn to wield them properly, Antoise, and you can shape the world itself. But sitting here in the lamplight, with the honest weight of responsibility pressing against his shoulders, Marcus understands something Fronto perhaps never grasped. The most powerful words are often the quietest ones, the simple truths spoken without flourish or artifice, like the cook's gentle wisdom about acceptance, like the prayers his mother whispered over him as a child, like the unspoken understanding that passes between him and the guard who stands faithful, watch in the darkness. He dips his stylus in ink and writes slowly, deliberately. We are like actors in a play, but we did not choose our roles. We can only choose how well we perform them, with what grace, with what courage, with what love for the other players who share this brief stage with us. The words feel true as they flow from his hand, carrying with them the accumulated weight of sleepless nights and impossible choices, of victories that felt like defeats, and defeats that taught him the deeper meaning of strength. He thinks of the barbarian chieftains he has faced across negotiation tables, men whose eyes held the same fundamental longing for peace that burns in his own heart, enemies who were perhaps simply other actors, playing their assigned parts in this vast drama of empire and resistance. Gaius hears the scratch of stylus against papyrus, a sound that has become as familiar as his own heartbeat during these long frontier campaigns. He knows that within that tent, his emperor is engaged in a form of labor more demanding than any physical battle, the work of examining one's own soul, of trying to live with integrity when the world demands compromise at every turn, of finding meaning in duty when duty often requires choosing between competing goods. The rain continues its gentle percussion against the tent, and Marcus finds himself grateful for this simple music, this reminder that the world continues its ancient rhythms regardless of human ambition or anxiety, Rivers flow, seasons turn, rain falls on the just and unjust alike. And there is something profoundly comforting in this recognition of his own small place within the larger pattern. He remembers walking along the Tiber as a young man, before the weight of the purple settled on his shoulders, watching the water carry leaves and debris toward the sea, marveling at how the river seemed to accept everything the city offered it, transforming waste into motion, finding purpose in the simple act of flowing towards something larger than itself. Perhaps this is what philosophy truly teaches, not how to control the current, but how to move with it, how to find grace in the flowing itself. The universe is change, he writes. Our life is what our thoughts make it. We suffer more in imagination than in reality, because we forget that this moment, this breath, this heartbeat, is all we truly possess. Everything else is memory or anticipation, shadow and speculation. Outside, a night bird calls across the camp, its voice carrying a loneliness that somehow comforts rather than disturbs. Gaius tilts his head to listen, recognizing in that sound something essential about the human condition, the way we call out into the darkness, not always expecting an answer, but simply needing to affirm our presence, to say, I am here, I am awake, I am keeping watch. Marcus sets down his stylus again, flexing fingers that have grown stiff from writing, and looks around the simple interior of his tent, at the camp bed with its rough wool blankets, at the basin of water that reflects the lamplight like a small mirror, at the maps and dispatches that tomorrow will once again demand his attention, all of it temporary, all of it borrowed, all of it part of the role he has been given to play. But tonight, in this quiet hour when the camp sleeps and the rain whispers its ancient secrets, he feels something approaching peace, not the peace of resolution, but the deeper peace of acceptance, the recognition that he need not solve every problem or heal every wound, that his task is simpler and more profound, to meet each moment with as much wisdom and compassion as he can summon, to trust that this, somehow, is enough. The lamplight continues its gentle dance, and both emperor and guard settle deeper into their respective vigils, one writing his way toward understanding, the other standing faithful watch over the space where such understanding becomes possible. Both of them servants of something larger than themselves, both of them finding, in the midst of war and uncertainty, the quiet dignity that comes from doing what must be done, with love, with attention, with the kind of presence that transforms duty into devotion, and the night deepens around them, holding their separate solitudes in its vast embrace, teaching them, as it teaches all who are willing to listen, that we are never truly alone when we commit ourselves to the ancient work of consciousness, to the patient labor of becoming fully human, to the sacred task of watching over one another through the long darkness that precedes every dawn. Dawn's promise. The darkness has been their teacher, and now, very slowly, very gently, the first whisper of change touches the eastern horizon. Marcus feels it before he sees it, that subtle shift in the quality of silence, the way the night begins to loosen its hold, not retreating, but transforming, becoming something new. He sets down his stylus, flexes fingers that have grown stiff from writing, and lifts his eyes toward the tent flap where the faintest suggestion of light, pale as morning mist, begins to filter through the heavy fabric. The Danube continues its ancient conversation, but even its voice seems different now, expectant, as if the river too knows that something sacred approaches. Outside, Gaius shifts his weight, feeling that same inexplicable lightning, the way dawn announces itself not with fanfare, but with the gentlest possible whisper, a promise spoken so softly that only those who have learned to listen, who have spent the night in patient vigil, can hear its approach. Marcus rises slowly, muscles protesting the long hours of stillness, and moves to the tent opening. He parts the flap just enough to glimpse the world beyond, and there, along the rim of the earth, the sky has begun to blush, the deepest indigo slowly, so slowly, warming toward something that might, eventually, become rose, become gold, become the full glory of morning. But not yet. For now, it is enough to witness this most delicate of transformations, this daily miracle that he has seen thousands of times, and yet, after this night of deep reflection, feels as if he is seeing for the first time. The camp still sleeps, mostly. A few early stirrings, the soft shuffle of someone moving toward the latrines, the distant whinny of a horse, the crackle of embers being coaxed back to flame, the ordinary sounds of a world preparing to wake, sounds that once seemed beneath his notice, but which now strike him as profoundly beautiful, evidence of life continuing, of humans and animals and the earth itself participating in this daily resurrection. He thinks of Rome, still hours away from its own dawn, where senators and citizens sleep in beds far more comfortable than his simple camp cot, and realizes that he would not trade this moment, this particular quality of light and silence and possibility, for all the marble palaces of the eternal city. There is something about being present at the edge of things, at the frontier of empire, at the boundary between night and day, that strips away everything unnecessary, everything that merely glitters, leaving only what is essential, what is true. The broth bowl sits empty beside his writing materials, and he lifts it, feeling its warmth still lingering in the clay, remembering the woman who brought it, her weathered hands, her unexpected wisdom about acceptance and human limitation. How strange, how wonderful, that the most profound teaching of the night came not from his philosophical texts, not from his carefully reasoned meditations, but from someone whose name he doesn't even know, someone who simply saw his need and responded with kindness. This, too, is part of the lesson, part of what the night has been trying to teach him. That wisdom flows not from position or education or power, but from attention, from presence, from the willingness to see clearly what is actually here, rather than what we think should be here, or wish were here, or fear might be here. The light continues its patient work, and now he can make out the shapes of trees along the riverbank, the gentle curve of the Danube as it bends toward the east, the silhouettes of sleeping soldiers wrapped in their cloaks. All of it held in that pearl-gray luminescence that belongs neither to night nor day, but to the sacred space between them, the threshold where transformation becomes possible. Marcus feels something loosening in his chest, some knot of tension that he has carried so long he had forgotten it was there, not disappearing entirely. The responsibilities remain. The weight of empire will reassert itself with the full sunrise. But somehow, after this night of writing and reflection and unexpected grace, the burden feels different. Not lighter, exactly, but more bearable. More chosen. He thinks of the words he has written, the thoughts he has captured on parchment, and knows that they will remain long after this particular dawn has faded into memory, long after the immediate crises that seem so urgent now have resolved into history, the work of consciousness, the patient labor of becoming fully human. This continues, this endures, this matters in ways that transcend any single moment or decision or challenge. The sky brightens another degree. And with it comes the recognition that he has found what he was seeking in those sleepless hours. Not answers, exactly. Not solutions to the impossible problems that await him, but something more valuable, something more lasting, a renewed sense of connection to the natural world, to the people he serves, to the philosophical principles that have guided him through so many difficulties, and most importantly, to his own deepest self. The part of him that remains constant beneath all the roles and titles and expectations. He is Marcus, husband and father, student and teacher, emperor and philosopher. But beneath all of these, he is simply a human being, trying to live with honor and wisdom and compassion, trying to be worthy of the trust that has been placed in him, trying to leave the world a little better than he found it. The eastern horizon glows more boldly now, and he knows that soon, very soon, the sun will clear the tree line, and the day will begin in earnest, with its meetings and decisions and countless small and large responsibilities. But he is ready now, ready in a way he was not when the night began. Ready not because he has solved everything, but because he has remembered who he is, and why he does this work, and how to find strength in acceptance rather than resistance. Gaius straightens at his post, sensing the approach of the changing of the guard, the formal transition from night watch to morning duties. But he too has been changed by these quiet hours, has found his own form of peace in the patient work of standing vigil, of protecting this space where contemplation could unfold, where an emperor could become simply a man seeking wisdom in the darkness. The dawn comes, as it always comes, as it always will come, carrying its ancient promise that no matter how dark the night, how difficult the challenges, how heavy the burden, there is always, always the possibility of beginning again, of seeing with fresh eyes, of choosing love over fear, presence over performance, wisdom over mere cleverness. And Marcus-Aurelius, philosopher-emperor, tired man, grateful student of life's deepest teachings, prepares to meet whatever this new day will bring, carrying with him the gifts the night has offered, the peace that comes from acceptance, the strength that flows from connection, and the quiet joy of knowing that he is exactly where he needs to be, doing exactly what he is meant to do, held always in the vast embrace of something larger than himself, something that transforms duty into devotion and makes even the heaviest burden bearable. Undefined, the morning light grows stronger now, casting long golden rays across the camp, and Marcus feels the familiar stirring of the world awakening around him. The sounds of soldiers beginning their day drift softly through the tent walls, the quiet conversations, the gentle clanking of armor being donned, the soft footfalls of men moving with practiced efficiency through their morning routines. He sets down his stylus, his hand resting gently on the papyrus where his thoughts have found their home throughout this long and transformative night. The words he has written seem to pulse with their own quiet life, each reflection a small beacon of understanding, each insight a gift he has given not only to himself, but to all who might one day find comfort in these simple truths outside. Gaius completes his final rounds, his steps slower now, more contemplative. The weight of the night's vigil has settled into something precious, something he will carry with him long after this watch has ended. He has witnessed something sacred in these quiet hours, the way silence can hold both emperor and guard in the same gentle embrace, the way duty transforms into something beautiful when it is chosen rather than merely endured. The camp cook emerges from her tent, already preparing for the day's first meal, her movements sure and graceful in the growing light. She glances toward the emperor's tent with a knowing smile, understanding somehow that the night has done its work, that the man who will emerge will be the same, and yet changed, renewed by the ancient alchemy of darkness and contemplation. Marcus rises slowly, feeling the pleasant ache in his muscles from the long night of sitting and writing. He stretches, allowing his body to remember its own simple needs, its own humble wisdom. The philosopher-emperor, the man burdened with the weight of an empire, has remembered something essential about his own humanity, something that no amount of power or responsibility can diminish. He walks to the tent opening, drawing back the flap to let in the morning air. The Danube flows past in the distance, its surface now catching the early sunlight like scattered gold coins, still carrying its eternal message of endurance and acceptance. The river that seemed so melancholy in the darkness now appears peaceful, even joyful, as if it too has been renewed by the night's passage. The frontier stretches before him, no longer a place of exile, but a classroom where life's most important lessons are learned. Here, away from the marble corridors of Rome, away from the elaborate ceremonies and endless obligations of imperial life, he has found something that no palace could offer, the simple gift of being present to his own experience, of allowing himself to be exactly who he is, in this moment, in this place. Marcus breathes deeply, filling his lungs with the cool morning air. He thinks of all the mornings that have come before this one, all the dawns he has witnessed as emperor, and realizes that this one feels different, not because the sun shines more brightly, or because his burdens have disappeared, but because he has remembered how to carry them with grace. The words from his meditations echo gently in his mind, reminders he has written for himself, but that speak to something universal in the human experience. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. The truth of this settles into his bones, not as philosophy, but as lived understanding, wisdom earned through the patient work of a sleepless night. He thinks of his teachers, of Fronto with his love of eloquent words, of his mother with her quiet strength, of the camp cook with her simple wisdom about acceptance. All of them have contributed to this moment, this quiet dawn where understanding blooms like flowers after rain. He is not alone in his struggles. Never has been. Never will be. He is part of an ancient conversation about what it means to be human, what it means to carry responsibility with love rather than resentment. The sounds of the waking camp grow more distinct now, soldiers calling to one another, horses stirring in their makeshift stables, the everyday symphony of a community beginning another day. Marcus listens with new appreciation, hearing in these ordinary sounds the music of human resilience, the daily miracle of people choosing to continue, to care for one another, to find meaning in their shared endeavors. Soon his advisors will arrive, maps will be unrolled, decisions will need to be made about the ongoing campaign. The weight of empire will settle once again on his shoulders, but it will feel different now. Not lighter, perhaps, but more bearable, held within a larger understanding of what it means to serve something greater than oneself. He rolls up the papyrus carefully, these midnight thoughts that have become a bridge between his philosophical ideals and his lived reality. These words will travel with him, reminders of what this night has taught him, anchors he can return to when the burden feels too heavy, when the isolation threatens to overwhelm him. The tent flap moves gently in the morning breeze, and Marcus stands at the threshold between night and day, between the solitude that has restored him and the community that needs him. He is ready now, not because his problems have been solved, but because he has remembered who he is beneath all the roles and responsibilities, a human being, connected to all other human beings, doing his best with the life he has been given. And in this remembering, in this simple recognition of his place in the vast web of existence, he finds all the strength he needs to step forward into whatever this new day will bring. Gjenar's undefined. The morning light catches the pages of his meditations, the ink still wet from his night's writing, and Marcus feels something settle in his chest, a quietness that has nothing to do with the absence of sound and everything to do with the presence of peace. He sets down his stylus. These simple words on parchment, these thoughts that began as wrestling with sleeplessness, have become something else entirely, a map back to himself, a reminder of what endures when everything else falls away. The cook appears again, as if summoned by some ancient understanding of when souls need tending, carrying fresh bread and honey, her weathered hands steady, her eyes holding that same quiet knowing from the night before. The writing helped? She asks, not looking at the pages, but at his face, reading there what no scroll could contain. It reminded me, Marcus says slowly, that I am not the first to carry weight, nor will I be the last. There is comfort in that continuity. She nods, setting the bread beside him. My grandmother used to say, "We are all links in a chain that stretches back to the first human who looked up at the stars and wondered, and forward to the last one who will remember our names." The bread is warm, the honey golden in the morning light, and Marcus tastes in it something more than sustenance, the sweetness of connection, the nourishment that comes from being seen, truly seen, not as emperor or philosopher, but as a man who sometimes cannot sleep, who sometimes doubts, who sometimes needs reminding of his own humanity. "What will you do today?" she asks, and there is no urgency in the question, no expectation, just genuine curiosity about how this man, this fellow traveler, will choose to spend the hours he has been given. Marcus looks toward the tent flap, where morning sounds drift in, the murmur of men preparing for another day, the clink of armor, the soft whicker of horses, the eternal rhythm of human enterprise, and feels no dread, no overwhelming pressure, just a quiet readiness. "I will listen more than I speak," he says, surprising himself with the certainty in his voice. "I will remember that every person I meet carries their own invisible burdens. I will try to be present rather than perfect." The cook smiles, and in that smile is approval, not of an emperor, but of a human being who has found his way back to wisdom. That sounds like a good day's work. She begins to gather the empty bowl from the night before, but Marcus reaches out, gently touching her arm. "Thank you for seeing me, for feeding me, for reminding me that wisdom often comes disguised as ordinary kindness. We all need reminding sometimes," she says simply, "even those who are supposed to have all the answers." And as she moves away, her footsteps soft on the packed earth, Marcus feels the truth of what she has said settle into his bones. This need to be seen, to be known, to be reminded of our fundamental connection to each other. It is not weakness. It is the most human thing of all. He rolls up the pages of his meditations, these midnight wrestlings now transformed into morning clarity, and knows that he will return to them, not as escape from his duties, but as anchor for them, a way to remember, again and again, who he is beneath all the titles and expectations. The sounds of the camp grow louder now, men calling to each other, the business of another day beginning. And Marcus rises, not with the heavy reluctance of the night before, but with something approaching eagerness to be part of this human endeavor, this messy, complicated, beautiful business of living together, caring for each other, doing what we can with what we have been given. He steps toward the tent opening, pausing for a moment to look back at the simple space that held his sleeplessness, his doubt, his searching, and ultimately, his finding. It looks ordinary now, just canvas and rope, a few simple furnishings, but he knows it has been transformed, made sacred, by the simple act of honest wrestling, of allowing himself to be human, to be uncertain, to be real. The morning air touches his face, cool and clean, carrying the scent of river water and wood smoke, the eternal perfumes of human habitation, and Marcus breathes deeply, filling his lungs not just with air, but with acceptance, with gratitude, with the quiet strength that comes from remembering that we are all, every one of us, walking each other home. He is ready now, not because he has all the answers, but because he has remembered the right questions. Not how can I be perfect, but how can I be present? Not how can I control everything, but how can I respond with wisdom to whatever comes? And in this gentle shift, from grasping to receiving, from performing to being, he finds all the peace he needs to step forward into whatever this day and all the days to come will ask of him. Undefined. The sun climbs higher now over the Danube, casting long golden fingers through the morning mist, and Marcus feels something settling in his chest, something that has been restless for so long, finally coming to rest, like a bird finding its branch after a long flight through uncertain skies. He watches the river, still flowing, still carrying its ancient burden of water and time, and he understands now that he too is part of this endless current, not fighting against it, not trying to direct every drop, but moving with it, finding his place within its larger rhythm, his shoulders releasing tension he didn't even know he was carrying. The camp cook appears one final time, her weathered hands carrying a bowl of fresh porridge, steam rising like incense in the cool morning air, and when she sets it before him, their eyes meet with the quiet recognition of two souls who have shared something true in the darkness, something that needs no words, only this gentle acknowledgement, this bow of gratitude between teacher and student, though which is which, neither could say. "The night gave you what you needed," she says simply, and Marcus nods, understanding that sometimes the greatest gifts come not from seeking, but from surrendering, not from grasping after answers, but from sitting quietly, long enough, patiently enough, for wisdom to find its way home. He takes the warm bowl in his hands, feeling its simple weight, its honest warmth, and in this moment, he is not Caesar, not the burden-bearer of empire, not the philosopher struggling with impossible questions. He is simply a man, receiving nourishment, grateful for the kindness of another human being, grateful for this moment, this breath, this chance to begin again. The porridge tastes of grain and milk and honey, but also of something else, something that cannot be named but only felt, the taste of acceptance, of coming home to himself, of remembering that beneath all his roles and responsibilities, all his striving and suffering, there has always been this quiet center, this place of rest. Gaius approaches, his vigil complete, his face showing the peaceful exhaustion of duty faithfully kept, and Marcus rises to meet him. These two men who have shared the sacred watch, who have tended the flame of consciousness through the dark hours, who understand now that service, true service, is not burden but blessing, not weight but wings. "Thank you," Marcus says, and the words carry everything: gratitude for protection, for presence, for the gift of being witnessed, of not having to carry the night alone. And Gaius bows, not to the emperor, but to the man who has done the hard work of facing himself, of choosing again, of remembering why any of this matters. The meditations lie closed now, pages filled with the night's discoveries, with questions that led to deeper questions, with thoughts that spiraled down and down and down until they reached bedrock, until they found the unshakable foundation, not of certainty, but of acceptance, not of answers, but of peace with the questions themselves. Marcus walks to the edge of the camp, where the river runs wide and eternal, and he breathes deeply, filling his lungs with morning air, with the scent of water and earth and growing things, and he feels his body, really feels it, the weight of his feet on solid ground, the expansion of his chest, the beating of his heart, this miraculous vessel that carries him through each day, that asks for so little and gives so much. A bird calls from across the water, clear and sweet, and Marcus listens, really listens, not thinking about what it means, not analyzing its purpose, just receiving its gift, this moment of pure sound, pure presence, pure being, and he smiles, feeling something unlock inside him, some door that has been closed, swinging open, letting in light. He thinks of all the people he serves, the vast empire stretching in every direction, millions of souls, each carrying their own burdens, their own questions, their own longing for peace, and instead of feeling crushed by their weight, he feels connected, part of the great web, the endless network of care that holds the world together, not through force, but through love, through presence, through the simple act of showing up again and again, with whatever wisdom, whatever strength, whatever kindness the day requires. The morning light grows stronger, washing over the camp, over the river, over this man who has remembered, through one long night of patient sitting, of honest writing, of gentle conversation, that he is enough exactly as he is, not because he is perfect, but because he is human, not because he has all the answers, but because he is willing to keep asking the questions, to keep showing up, to keep walking each other home. And so Marcus Aurelius, philosopher and emperor, burden bearer and human being, steps forward into the new day, carrying nothing but presence, nothing but peace, nothing but the quiet certainty that whatever comes, he will meet it, not with the armor of perfection, but with the gentle strength of a heart that has finally learned to rest.